Hello, my name's Siddhanva. In my group, I have Patrick Chakraborty and Rodrigo De Leon Ruiz. We are presenting sense perception. Sense perception is one of the key ways of knowing in the theory of knowledge. It refers to the process through which we experience the world using our senses, specifically sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. In TOK, sense perception is important because it shapes much of our knowledge, but it also raises questions about reliability and subjectivity. For example, our senses can be influenced by perspective, context, or even illusions, which may mean what we perceive may not always reflect reality. By examining sense perception, TOK encourages us to ask to what extent can we trust what we see and experience, and how does sense perception interact with other ways of knowing, like reason or language? And also to add on, how does this relate to different AOKs? And how does this further build our knowledge? So to add on, one of our big questions is what is sense perception? And our second question is how does TOK interpret it? So what is it? Sense perception is one of the eight core WOKs in TOK, enabling knowledge acquisition through senses like sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, and proprioception, which refers to your sixth sense. This is when raw data is detected, processed, and interpreted by the brain through these said senses. TOK views it as an active, subjective process shaped by biology, culture, and various biases. This helps highlight the relativity between the subjects. For example, humans see only visible light, unlike animals detecting infrared radiation. However, it is also foundational for AOKs like natural sciences and the arts, but it invites knowledge questions on its fallibility, drawing from empiricists like Locke and Berkeley's idealism, which basically means to be is to be perceived. So to add on, sense perception comes with a couple of various perspectives. One of these being common sense realism. Common sense realism is a philosophical view particularly known as Scottish common sense realism that argues certain fundamental beliefs, such as the existence of the external world, are justified by their universal and intuitive acceptance in human experience rather than through abstract reasoning. This basically means we rely on our intuition to make judgments on our natural world. To add on, another perspective is scientific realism. This proposes that the external world exists but may differ from our perceptions. Scientific theories and findings often explain how our sensory experiences can be misleading or incomplete compared to the underlying reality. This basically goes against the first perspective that I've discussed. This basically refers to the fact that our perceptions about our world may not be necessarily true. And finally, the third perspective, which I'm talking about, is called phenomenalism. This argues that we can only know our perceptions, not the external world itself. The existence of an external world is irrelevant or unknowable, and inquiry should focus solely on our subjective experience. This once again goes a little bit in relation with common sense realism, as they both rely on intuition and human sense more than actual reason. Thank you.
The first AOK that we will be discussing is the natural sciences. First things first, we have to ask ourselves, what are natural sciences and how do they relate to sense perception? The natural sciences are the systematic study of the physical and living world, mainly physics, chemistry, and biology. Their main aim is to discover universal laws and principles through observation. The scientific method encompasses this system through its three steps: observation, hypothesis, and experimentation. In relation to TOK, the area of knowledge of natural sciences forms the foundation of empirical knowledge and allows for the development of evidence-based perception. Our first order question for the natural sciences is, how do tools like microscopes and telescopes extend human sense perception in science? This is a good first order question because it is very specific and concrete, and it is not about the exploration of knowledge. Our second order question for the natural sciences is, to what extent does the use of technology to extend our senses reduce or increase the subjectivity of scientific knowledge? This works as a second order question because it isn't about specific facts, it's more about the nature of knowledge itself in science. It invites debate about objectivity versus subjectivity when we know that our senses are already very subjective. Our real world example for the natural sciences and sense perception is the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, a virus known as COVID-19 spread all around the world. This virus was highly contagious, and scientists were able to create the vaccine in less than a year. The process of observation and experimentation was key to us creating the vaccine for it. This highlights the AOK of the natural sciences and reflects the idea of gaining knowledge through the process and development of the vaccine, which led to us overcoming the virus.
So moving away from the natural sciences AOK, we're going to dive into one of the most vibrant and subjective AOKs in the IB Theory of Knowledge curriculum, the arts, viewed explicitly through the lens of the sense perception WAOK, which we were assigned. Now, the arts encompasses a rainbow of human creativity, from visual masterpieces like paintings and sculptures, to performing arts such as theater and dance, literary gems like poetry and novels, and even film. Through our sense perception, our sight, hearing, touch, and more, we produce, interpret, and derive meaning from these expressions. The arts serve as a powerful lens to examine the human condition, cultural identities, and emotional realities, relying heavily on how our senses shape our understanding. Unlike the natural sciences, which chase objective facts through experiments, the arts thrive on subjective sensory experiences, fostering collaborative and interpretive knowledge between the artists who rely on their sensory experiences to create art and the consumers who rely on their sensory experiences to interpret the art. Now, the arts aren't just entertainment. They're a core way we gain knowledge by engaging our senses. Consider the world's oldest figurative cave paintings in Indonesia, dating back 35,400 years. Visually perceiving these images reveals early symbolic thinking through sight. In pop culture, Taylor Swift's Folklore album lets us hear narratives of loss and resilience, or Marvel's Black Panther engages our visual and auditory senses to spotlight African cultural identities. The arts emphasize emotional truths over empirical data, and sense perception drives this feeling. The feeling of a texture of a sculpture, or the feeling of hearing a symphony's rhythm shape our understanding in ways data alone can't. Now let's tackle a first order knowledge question. How does sense perception influence the evaluation of a specific artwork when resolving disagreements between conflicting interpretations? This zooms into sense perception because it's key. Our senses, sight, sound, and touch, filter experiences, but they're shaped by biases and emotions. Take Christopher Nolan's Inception. One viewer might focus on the spinning top's visual wobble, perceiving it as evidence of a dream, while others rely on the auditory heartbeat and emotional resonance to see it as reality. Resolving this, sense perception provides shared sensory cues, like the film's tense score, but subjectivity persists. Memories also color perception. A psychology buff might see, quote unquote, subconscious layers that others might miss. Sense perception thus drives interpretation, but complicates consensus. Shifting to a second-order question, to what extent can knowledge in the arts only be gained through sensory experiences? And how does this affect its reliability compared to other AOKs? In the arts, sensory experience is often essential. You can't fully grasp Beethoven's Fifth Symphony by reading sheet music. You need to hear its dramatic musical elements, which are auditory, to feel the emotional knowledge it conveys through auditory perception. Similarly, experiencing Picasso's Guernica in person, its massive scale overwhelms your senses, delivers anti-war knowledge that a photo can't match. Pop culture-wise, watching The Mandalorian on Disney Plus immerses you in Star Wars lore through visuals and sound, getting insights into heroism that analysis alone misses. But is this reliable? Compared to natural sciences where knowledge comes from repeatable experiments, art knowledge is subjective and interpretive, and it is prone to bias. Fiction reading boosts empathy via sensory engagement with narratives, but misinterpretations abound, like bubonic plague art depicting biblical scenes instead of facts, distorting historical knowledge. In TOK, this highlights art's strength and emotional truths, but weaknesses in objective reliability. We've talked a lot about different real-world examples, but to really hone in on one, we're going to look at a 2015 photo of a dress that went viral because some perceived it as blue and black, while others saw white and gold, due to ambiguous lighting and individual differences in color constancy, how the brain adjusts for shadows. This highlights sense perception's subjectivity. Biological factors like cone cell sensitivity and prior expectations filter the same visual input, challenging objective knowledge in shared contexts, like social media. Alright, and finally we're going to look at sense perception through the theme of the knowledge of the knower, which is one of the most important themes in the entire IB curriculum. In terms of the scope of the knowledge of the knower through sensory perception, sense perception defines boundaries for direct engagement, with reality capturing tangible data for personal knowledge. Its limits stem from human biology and environment, needing tools like microscopes for expansion. In terms of perspectives, the knower's viewpoints shaped by culture and emotions filter sensory data into varied interpretations. This fosters multiple viewpoints but risks stereotypes from biased visual cues. In terms of methods and tools, perception involves stages of detection, processing, and interpretation, making it an active process. Tools like smartphones enhance capabilities, but expectations introduce biases into outcomes. And in terms of ethics, ethical issues emerge from manipulated perceptions like deepfakes deceiving the senses and requiring verification. This imposes duties to examine biases and to avoid harm in knowledge sharing. These are references, and if you're more curious, you can look directly at them.